You do not lose a tank battle to the Soviets. This was the fundamental certainty of German military doctrine in 1941. Germany had the Panzer III, the Panzer IV, the most experienced tank crews in the world, and tactical doctrine proven in Poland, France, and North Africa. German armor was superior. German training was superior. German coordination between tanks, infantry, and air support was unmatched. The Wehrmacht had defeated every army it faced. Soviet armor would be no different. The mathematics supported this confidence. In 1940, Germany rolled through France in 6 weeks. France, with its vast tank forces, its Maginot Line, its alliances. The French had more tanks than Germany, but German doctrine, training, and leadership proved decisive. German panzer divisions cut through French lines like they weren't there. The Panzer III and IV crushed French Charbonniers and Saumur S-35s through superior tactics and coordination. The Soviets? Their performance in the 1939 Winter War against Finland was embarrassing. Soviet tank tactics were rigid, unimaginative, vulnerable. Their armor doctrine was outdated. Their officer corps had been gutted by Stalin's purges, experienced commanders executed, replaced with political loyalists. Soviet industry produced quantity, not quality. Soviet tanks were crude, unreliable, poorly designed. German intelligence confirmed this assessment. Reports showed the Soviets had thousands of tanks, the BT series, the T-26, the multi-turreted T-28 and T-35. But these were obsolete designs. Thin armor, weak guns, mechanical unreliability. Nothing that worried German planners. The Panzer III, with its 50mm gun, could penetrate Soviet armor easily. The Panzer IV, with its 75mm gun, would dominate Soviet tanks at range. German superiority was assured. And this wasn't arrogance. This was calculation based on evidence. Germany had tested its armor against the best the West had to offer. The panzer divisions had proven themselves in actual combat against modern armies. Soviet armor, by contrast, had struggled against Finland, a nation with no tanks at all. So when Hitler ordered Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, on June 22, 1941, German tank commanders were confident. They expected a repeat of France. Soviet armies would crumble. Soviet tanks would burn. The war would be over by winter. 3 million German soldiers crossed the Soviet border. 3,000 tanks. 2,000 aircraft. The largest invasion force in human history. They rolled east, expecting victory. And for the first weeks, that's exactly what happened. Soviet armies collapsed. German panzers broke through Soviet lines, encircled entire armies, captured hundreds of thousands of prisoners. By July, the Germans had advanced 500 miles. By August, they were approaching Moscow. But something was wrong. German tank crews started reporting encounters with a new Soviet tank. Not the obsolete BT or T-26. Something else. Something that their 37mm and 50mm guns couldn't penetrate. Something faster than it should be. Something that could destroy Panzer IIIs and IVs at ranges where German tanks couldn't fight back. The reports were scattered at first. Individual encounters. Tank crews claiming they'd seen a Soviet tank bounce German shells like they were pebbles. Crews reporting Soviet tanks that could drive through mud where German tanks got stuck. Commanders dismissed these reports initially. Battlefield confusion, exaggeration, stress. But the reports kept coming. And in September 1941, General Heinz Guderian, commander of Panzer Group II, one of Germany's most experienced and successful tank commanders, wrote a report that would change German armor doctrine forever. The T-34 was real, and it was superior to anything Germany had. Heinz Guderian is 53 years old in 1941. He's from Kulm, Prussia, now Chelmno, Poland, military family. He joined the German army in 1907, served in World War I, stayed in the military afterward. But Guderian isn't a traditional infantry officer. He's a theorist, a tactician, an innovator. In the 1920s and 1930s, while most German officers focused on trench warfare and defensive doctrine, Guderian studied mobile warfare. He read British theorists like J.F.C. Fuller and Basil Liddell Hart. He studied how tanks could be used not as infantry support, but as independent striking forces. He developed the concept of blitzkrieg, lightning war, concentrated armor breaking through enemy lines, penetrating deep into the rear, disrupting command and supply, encircling entire armies before they could react. In 1937, he published Achtung, Panzer, a book outlining his theories. The German High Command was skeptical. Traditional generals saw tanks as support weapons. Guderian argued they should be the main striking force. He lobbied for dedicated panzer divisions, tanks, motorized infantry, artillery, all coordinated for rapid offensive operations. Hitler listened. Hitler liked the idea of aggressive, decisive action. Guderian got his panzer divisions, and in 1939 and 1940, he proved his theories in Poland and France. His tanks cut through Polish defenses in days. His Panzer Corps crossed the Ardennes, terrain the French thought was impassable for armor, and broke through at Sedan, driving to the English Channel, splitting the Allied armies, forcing French surrender. Guderian became a legend, the master of armored warfare, the man who had revolutionized military doctrine. By 1941, he's a Generaloberst, Colonel General, commanding Panzer Group II in Operation Barbarossa. His force includes over 1,000 tanks, Panzer Is, IIs, IIIs, and IVs, plus captured Czech tanks. These are the cutting edge of German military power. But Guderian knows tanks. He understands armor design. He knows the Panzer III, Germany's main battle tank in 1941, has weaknesses. Its 50mm gun is adequate but not overwhelming. Its armor, 30mm on the hull, 30mm on the turret front, provides protection against most threats but isn't invincible. The Panzer IV has a better gun, 75mm, but it's designed for infantry support, not tank versus tank combat. And its low velocity, 75mm, can't penetrate heavy armor at range. Still, these tanks are good enough. German training and tactics compensate for technical limitations. German tank crews are veterans. They know how to use terrain, how to coordinate with infantry and artillery, how to maneuver for advantageous positions. Soviet tanks, even if technically better, won't matter if Soviet crews don't know how to use them, or so Guderian believes in June 1941. Operation Barbarossa begins on June 22nd. Guderian's Panzer Group II advances through Belorussia, heading toward Moscow. The initial advance is spectacular. Soviet armies are caught off guard, poorly deployed, poorly commanded. German panzers break through Soviet lines, encircle entire divisions, capture massive numbers of prisoners and equipment. But the advance is harder than expected. Soviet resistance, though disorganized, is fierce. Soviet soldiers fight to the death. Soviet artillery is more effective than anticipated. And the terrain is worse than German planners predicted. Roads are primitive. Mud is everywhere. German tanks, designed for European roads, struggle with Russian terrain. And then there are the encounters with new Soviet tanks. July 1941. Guderian's units report engaging Soviet tanks that don't match intelligence profiles. These tanks are medium weight, not the light BT series, not the heavy Koans German intelligence knew about. Something in between, but fast. very fast, and with armor that German 37mm guns can't penetrate. The reports multiply, near Minsk, near Smolensk, near Yelnya. German tank commanders describe Soviet tanks with sloped armor, not vertical plates like German tanks, but angled, deflecting shells instead of absorbing them. They describe Soviet tanks with wide tracks that can traverse mud and snow where German tanks bog down. They describe Soviet 76mm guns that can destroy Panzer IIIs at ranges where German guns are ineffective. Guderian reads these reports with growing concern. He orders his intelligence officers to investigate. He wants to know what these Soviet tanks are, where they come from, how many the Soviets have, whether this is an isolated threat or a systemic problem. August 1941. One of Guderian's panzer divisions captures and fires an intact Soviet tank. The crew abandoned it after mechanical failure. German engineers examine it. It's a T-34. And when Guderian sees the technical specifications, he understands that everything has changed. The T-34 weighs 26 tons. It has a 500 horsepower V2 diesel engine, giving it a top speed of 35 miles per hour on roads, 15 miles per hour cross-country. Its armor is sloped at 60 degrees on the front hull, 45 millimeters thick. But the sloping means effective thickness against direct fire is over 90 millimeters. The turret front is 45 millimeters thick. The gun is a 76 millimeter F-34, capable of penetrating 69 millimeters of armor at 500 meters. Guderian does the math. His Panzer IIIs have 30 millimeters of frontal armor. The T-34 can penetrate that at over 1,000 meters. The Panzer III's 50 millimeter gun can penetrate 60 millimeters of armor at 500 meters, but the T-34's sloped armor means it's effectively 90 millimeters or more. The Panzer III can't reliably penetrate a T-34 from the front at any range. The Panzer IV's 75mm gun has better penetration, but it's a low-velocity gun designed for high explosive shells against infantry. Against armor, it's marginal, and the Panzer IV's armor is even thinner than the Panzer III's. This isn't a marginal advantage for the Soviets. This is a generational leap. The T-34 is superior to German tanks in firepower, armor, and mobility. On paper, the T-34 is the best tank in the world. Guderian writes a report. He sends it up the chain of command, to Army Group Center, to OKH, Oberkommando des Heeres, the German Army High Command, eventually to Hitler himself. The report is direct. The T-34 is superior to our Panzer III and IV. We need to develop a response immediately, either improve our existing tanks or design new ones. If we don't, we will lose the armor war in the East. The German High Command is skeptical. One tank doesn't change a war. Besides, the Wehrmacht is winning. Soviet armies are collapsing. Moscow will fall soon. The war will be over. Guderian insists. The T-34 isn't one tank. It's a type. Soviet industry is producing them. As German forces advance deeper into Russia, they'll encounter more. And if Soviet crews learn to use them effectively, German armor superiority will evaporate. In September 1941, Guderian convenes a commission. He brings together German tank commanders, engineers, and industry representatives. He shows them a captured T-34. He shows them the combat reports. He explains the threat. The reaction is shock. German engineers examine the T-34 in detail. They test its armor. They test its gun. They test its mobility. Every test confirms. The T-34 is better than anything Germany has. But how did the Soviets, who can't even defeat Finland, design such a tank? The story of the T-34 begins not in 1941, but in 1937, and it begins with a man named Mikhail Koshkin. Koshkin is an engineer. He works at the Kharkov locomotive factory in Ukraine, a Soviet industrial plant that's been converted to produce tanks. He's the chief designer on a project to develop a replacement for the BT series, Soviet cavalry tanks known for high speed but weak armor. The BT tanks, Bystrokodny tank, or fast tank, are based on a 1930s American design by J. Walter Christie. They have sloped armor, wide tracks, and powerful engines, but they're lightly armored. The BT-7 has only 22 millimeters of armor. They're designed for breakthrough operations, not sustained combat. Koshkin studies tank design. He studies German tanks. He studies the lessons from the Spanish Civil War, where Soviet tanks fought against German tanks supplied to Franco's forces. He realizes that future tank warfare will require a balance: mobility, armor, and firepower. Soviet doctrine emphasizes mobility, but Koshkin believes armor and firepower are equally important. In 1937, he proposes a new design: not a light cavalry tank, a medium tank, heavier than the BT series but still fast, with sloped armor to maximize protection, with a 76mm gun for anti-tank capability, with wide tracks for cross-country mobility, a tank that can fight enemy armor, absorb hits, and traverse the muddy terrain of Western Russia. Soviet bureaucracy is resistant. The military wants a wheeled tank, something that can drive on roads without tracks, then engage tracks for off-road travel. Koshkin argues this is overcomplicated. Wheels add weight and mechanical complexity without significant benefit. Just use tracks. Make them wide for low ground pressure. Make them reliable. The argument goes back and forth. Finally, Koshkin is authorized to build two prototypes, one with wheels and tracks, the A-20, one with only tracks, the A-32. They'll test both, see which is better. In 1939, the prototypes are built. Testing begins. The A-20 performs adequately. The A-32, the tracked-only design, performs better, faster, more reliable, better cross-country mobility. Koshkin argues for the A-32. But he wants more armor. He proposes increasing the armor thickness from 30 millimeters to 45 millimeters, adding sloped armor at 60 degrees, and upgrading to a more powerful 76mm gun. The military approves. The new design is designated T-34. Production begins in 1940. The first T-34s roll off the assembly line at the Kharkov factory in September 1940. Koshkin wants to demonstrate the tank's capabilities to Stalin personally. In March 1940, he leads a convoy of T-34s from Kharkov to Moscow, over 1,200 miles in winter conditions, to prove the tank's reliability. The demonstration succeeds. Stalin approves full-scale production, but Koshkin, exposed to freezing temperatures during the demonstration, contracts pneumonia. He dies in September 1940 at age 42. He never sees his design in combat. By June 1941, when Germany invades, the Soviet Union has produced approximately 1,200 T-34s. They're scattered across Soviet armored units, often mixed with obsolete BT and T-26 tanks. Many Soviet tank commanders don't understand the T-34's capabilities. Many Soviet crews aren't trained on the new tank. Many T-34s are lost in the opening weeks of Barbarossa, not in combat, but through mechanical failure, poor logistics, and disorganized retreat. But some T-34s reach the front line, and when they engage German tanks, the results are catastrophic for the Wehrmacht. July 15th, 1941. Near Seno, Belarusia. Elements of the German 17th Panzer Division encounter Soviet 5th Tank Division. The battle begins, as most Eastern Front engagements do, German tanks advancing, expecting to overwhelm Soviet forces through superior tactics and coordination. A German Panzer, 3 commander, we'll call him Hauptmann, captain, Friedrich, a veteran of Poland and France, orders his platoon forward. They spot Soviet tanks at 800 meters. Beat-7s, probably. Easy targets. He orders his gunner to engage. The gunner fires. The round hits. It bounces off. Friedrich is confused. An 800-meter shot should penetrate a BT-7 easily. He orders another shot. The gunner fires again. The round hits the Soviet tank's frontal armor. Again, it bounces off. The Soviet tank returns fire. The 76mm shell hits Friedrich's Panzer III on the front hull. The shell penetrates. The Panzer III explodes. Friedrich is killed instantly, along with his crew. This scenario plays out across the Eastern Front in summer and fall 1941. German tank commanders engage what they think are Soviet light tanks. Their shells bounce off. The Soviet tanks, T-34s, destroy German tanks with single shots. German crews panic. They report invincible Soviet tanks. They report Soviet tanks that can't be stopped. September 1941. Guderian's Panzer Group II is advancing toward Orel. A German tank battalion, equipped with Panzer IIIs and IVs, encounters a Soviet tank brigade near Mtsensk. The Soviet brigade includes T-34s commanded by Colonel Mikhail Koshkin, one of the few Soviet tank commanders who understands how to use the T-34 effectively. Katukov orders his T-34s to engage from defensive positions, not charging the Germans. That's suicide, even in a T-34. Instead, using terrain, engaging at range, withdrawing before German tanks can coordinate artillery or air support. The battle is a disaster for the Germans. Katukov's T-34s destroy 18 German tanks for minimal losses. The German battalion commander reports to Guderian, "We cannot defeat these tanks. Our guns don't penetrate them. They destroy us from ranges where we can't fight back. We need better tanks or we'll lose." Guderian forwards this report to Okout. He adds his own assessment. "The T-34 is the best tank in the world. We must develop a counter immediately." But developing a new tank takes time, years. Meanwhile, the Wehrmacht has to fight with the tanks it has. German tank crews develop improvised tactics. Don't engage T-34s from the front. Maneuver for side or rear shots. The T-34's side armor is only 45mm, and the rear is even thinner. Use terrain to ambush T-34s at close range. Coordinate with 88mm anti-aircraft guns, which can penetrate T-34 armor. Use air power. Stukas with 37mm cannon can penetrate T-34s from above. These tactics work, but they require skill, coordination, and favorable terrain. In a straight fight, tank versus tank, the T-34 wins. October 1941. Guderian's forces are bogged down near Tula. The advance toward Moscow has stalled. Soviet resistance is stiffening. The weather is deteriorating. Rain turns roads to mud. German tanks, with narrow tracks, can't maneuver in the mud. T-34s, with wide tracks and lower ground pressure, can. German infantry report being overrun by T-34s that drive through defensive positions, crushing trenches, destroying bunkers. German anti-tank guns, 37mm and 50mm, bounce shells off T-34 armor. Infantry learn to fear the T-34 more than Soviet artillery or air power. November 1941. Winter arrives. German tanks, designed for Western European conditions, struggle with extreme cold. Engines won't start. Transmissions freeze. Tracks become brittle and break. The T-34, with a diesel engine designed for Soviet winters, continues operating. German tank crews realize they're not just facing a better tank, they're facing a tank designed for this theater. The T-34 is built for Russian conditions: mud, snow, cold, poor roads. German tanks are built for French roads and Polish plains. In Russia, technical superiority isn't just about armor and guns, it's about reliability and survivability in extreme conditions. And the T-34 is better at all of it. Guderian's reports become more urgent. He writes to Oki in November 1941. The T-34 is a serious threat. Our current tanks are inadequate. We must either develop new tanks with equivalent or superior capabilities, or we risk losing the Eastern Front. The German High Command convenes meetings. Engineers study the captured T-34s. They make recommendations. Option 1. Copy the T-34 directly. Build German T-34s. This would be fast. Just copy a proven design. Option 2. Improve existing German tanks. Upgun the Panzer IV with a longer 75mm. Add more armor to the Panzer III. Option 3. Design entirely new tanks based on lessons from the T-34. Create a German medium tank with sloped armor, a powerful gun, and wide tracks. German engineers argue for Option 3. Copying the T-34 directly would work, but German industry uses different manufacturing processes. Soviet factories use welding and large cast pieces. German factories use bolted armor and machined parts. Retooling German factories to produce T-34 copies would take too long. Improving existing tanks is a stopgap. The Panzer IV can be upgunned, yes, but its basic chassis has limits. You can only add so much weight before the suspension fails. You can only make the gun so large before the turret ring can't support it. A new design is the only real solution. But new designs take time. 2 years, minimum, from concept to production. In December 1941, Hitler orders the development of 2 new tanks: the Panther medium tank, designed to match or exceed the T-34, and the Tiger heavy tank, designed to overmatch anything the Soviets have. But these won't be ready until 1943 at earliest. Meanwhile, the Wehrmacht has to fight the war with the tanks it has. If you find this kind of military engineering and tactical evolution as fascinating as we do, we'd be honored if you'd hit that subscribe button. We believe these stories of innovation, adaptation, and the hard lessons of war deserve to be told. And by subscribing, you help us ensure they aren't forgotten. Because the T-34's impact went far beyond individual battles. It forced a complete rethinking of German armor doctrine, tank design, and strategic planning for the rest of the war. What the Germans didn't fully understand in 1941 was that the T-34 wasn't just a better tank. It was a design philosophy that would shape armored warfare for decades. The T-34 embodied principles that Soviet designers understood intuitively: simplicity, reliability, producibility. Western tank designs prioritized crew comfort, ease of maintenance, and technical sophistication. The T-34 prioritized combat effectiveness and mass production. The T-34's interior was cramped. The commander had to serve as gunner. There was no separate gunner position. Visibility was poor. The driver's vision slit was narrow. The commander's cupola limited. The transmission was difficult to operate. Changing gears required a sledgehammer. Crew training was minimal. Soviet tank crews often went into combat with weeks of training, sometimes less. But none of that mattered if the tank could destroy enemy armor, survive hits, and be produced in massive numbers. And the Soviets could produce T-34s. The design was simple enough for factories with relatively unskilled labor. Components were modular. The diesel engine was based on an existing aluminum alloy aircraft engine. The transmission, though crude, was reliable. The armor plates could be cast or welded with basic equipment. By 1942, Soviet factories were producing 1,500 T-34s per month. By 1943, over 1,300 per month, and that's just T-34s, not including other tank types. Total Soviet tank production in 1942, 24,446 tanks. In 1943, 24,089 tanks. Germany, by comparison, produced 4,278 tanks in 1942, 5,966 in 1943. The math was brutal. Even if German tanks were technically superior, and after late 1942, they weren't, Soviet numerical superiority would overwhelm German forces. But the T-34 forced more than just production changes. It forced doctrinal changes. Before encountering the T-34, German tank doctrine emphasized maneuver, coordination, and tactical flexibility. German tanks didn't need to be the best technically, they just needed to be good enough, combined with superior tactics and training. The T-34 challenged this assumption. Soviet tanks were technically superior and numerous. German tactical superiority could only compensate so much. If a German Panzer III encountered 3 T-34s, the Panzer III lost. No amount of tactical skill could overcome that matchup. German doctrine evolved. Anti-tank warfare became defensive-oriented. German tanks would engage from prepared positions, using terrain for protection. The 88mm anti-aircraft gun, originally designed for air defense, became the primary anti-tank weapon. German armor shifted from offensive breakthrough operations to defensive counterattacks and mobile defense. The Panzer IV received upgrades. In 1942, the long-barreled 75mm Kubik-40 was installed, a high-velocity gun capable of penetrating T-34 armor at reasonable ranges. Armor was increased to 80mm on the front. The Panzer IV went from an infantry support tank to a main battle tank. But the real response was the Panther, the Panzerkampfwagen V. The Panther was Germany's direct answer to the T-34. Sloped armor at 55 degrees, not quite as steep as the T-34, but close. A powerful 75mm KWK-42 gun, capable of penetrating the T-34's armor at 2,000 meters. Weight 45 tons, nearly twice the T-34's weight, but with a more powerful engine to compensate. The Panther was designed to match the T-34's strengths and exceed them in firepower and armor. The first Panthers entered service in summer 1943 at the Battle of Kursk. They performed well against T-34s. The 75mm gun was devastating, the sloped armor effective. But Panthers were complex, expensive, and prone to mechanical failure. Germany produced 6,000 Panthers total during the war. The Soviets produced over 84,000 T-34s. The Tiger, Germany's heavy tank, was even more impressive technically. 100mm of frontal armor, an 88mm KWK-36 gun that could destroy any Allied tank at ranges over 2,000 meters. The Tiger was nearly invincible in direct combat, but it was also extremely expensive, mechanically unreliable, and Germany only produced 1,347 of them. Meanwhile, the T-34 evolved. In 1944, the Soviets introduced the T-34-85, an upgraded version with an 85mm gun and 3-man turret, commander, gunner, loader. The T-34-85 could penetrate German armor more effectively and had better crew ergonomics. It still wasn't as technically sophisticated as the Panther or Tiger, but it was good enough, produced in massive numbers, and available. The strategic impact was decisive. German armor superiority, which had defined the early war years, evaporated. By 1943, Soviet tank forces could match or exceed German forces qualitatively and vastly outnumber them quantitatively. The tide of the war shifted. At Kursk in July 1943, Germany launched its last major offensive on the Eastern Front, Operation Citadel. The Germans committed 2,700 tanks, including the new Panthers and Tigers. The Soviets defended with over 5,000 tanks, mostly T-34s. The Germans advanced initially, but Soviet defenses held. German tank losses were unsustainable. The offensive failed. After Kursk, Germany never regained the initiative on the Eastern Front. Soviet forces advanced westward, pushing German armies back. T-34s led Soviet armored thrusts into Poland, Romania, Hungary, and eventually Germany itself. By 1945, T-34s were rolling through the streets of Berlin. The T-34's influence extended beyond World War II. Its design philosophy, simplicity, reliability, mass production, good enough technical performance combined with numerical superiority became the model for Soviet and Warsaw Pact armored vehicles for decades. The T-54-55, the T-62, the T-72 all descended from T-34 design principles. Western tank design evolved differently. American, British, and German post-war tanks prioritized technical sophistication, crew comfort, and survivability. But the T-34's lessons remained relevant. Don't over-engineer, prioritize battlefield effectiveness, and remember that quantity has a quality all its own. Guderian survived the war. He was relieved of command in December 1941 after disagreements with Hitler over strategy. He returned in 1943 as Inspector General of Armored Troops, overseeing Panther and Tiger production. After the war, he wrote his memoirs, Panzer Leader, published in 1952. He acknowledged the T-34's impact explicitly. The finest tank in the world at that time was the Russian T-34. That admission, from the man who pioneered modern armored warfare, who commanded Germany's panzer forces at their peak, speaks volumes about the T-34's significance. Mikhail Koshkin never saw his tank in combat. He died in September 1940, 11 months before Operation Barbarossa. He was 42 years old. He received the Stalin Prize posthumously in 1942, after the T-34's effectiveness became clear. In 1990, after the Soviet Union's collapse, Ukraine honored him with a monument in Kharkov. Koshkin's design team continued his work. Alexander Morozov, Koshkin's deputy, oversaw the T-34's production and development throughout the war. He later designed the T-44 and T-54, continuing the T-34's design lineage into the Cold War. Over 84,000 T-34s were produced during World War II and in the immediate post-war years. That's more than any other tank in history. T-34s served in the Red Army until the 1950s, when they were replaced by the T-54-55. But T-34s remained in service with Soviet allies and client states for decades. T-34s fought in the Korean War, North Korean. T-34s faced American M26 Pershings and M4 Shermans. They fought in the Middle East. Egypt and Syria used T-34s against Israel in 1956, 1967, and 1973. They fought in Africa. Various nations used T-34s in civil wars and border conflicts. T-34s fought in Yugoslavia in the 1990s. Some T-34s are still in service today. Yemen's military reportedly operates T-34s. Small numbers exist in other developing nations. The T-34, designed in 1939, remains operational 85 years later. Museums and memorials around the world display T-34s. The Kubinka Tank Museum outside Moscow has multiple variants. The Bovington Tank Museum in England has a T-34-85. The U.S. Army Armor Museum at Fort Moore has a T-34. Berlin has a T-34 memorial marking the Soviet capture of the city. In Russia and former Soviet states, the T-34 is a symbol. It represents Soviet industrial might, the Red Army's victory over Nazi Germany, and the sacrifice of the Soviet people during the Great Patriotic War. Every May 9th, Victory Day, restored T-34s participate in military parades in Moscow and other cities. The crews who fought in T-34s are almost all gone now. The last Soviet veterans of World War II are in their late 90s or older. But their stories remain. Veterans described the T-34 as cramped, uncomfortable, and brutal to operate, but effective. They described the terror of German 88mm guns, the relief when German tanks withdrew, the pride in knowing they had the better tank. German veterans told different stories. They described the shock of encountering T-34s for the first time, the frustration of hitting a T-34 and watching the shell bounce off, the fear when a T-34 appeared at close range, and their tank couldn't penetrate its armor. German veterans who survived the war often cited the T-34 as the weapon that changed the Eastern Front. Heinz Guderian's recognition of the T-34's superiority in 1941 was vindicated by history. His warnings to the German High Command proved correct. The T-34 did force a complete redesign of German armor strategy. It did contribute to Germany's defeat on the Eastern Front. Guderian himself, reflecting after the war, admitted that the T-34 was one of the key factors in Germany's failure to win in Russia. The T-34 represents more than engineering or battlefield performance. It represents industrial capacity, strategic vision, and the willingness to prioritize effectiveness over perfection. Koshkin and his team didn't design the most comfortable tank or the most technically sophisticated tank. They designed a tank that could be produced by the thousands, operated by crews with minimal training, and win battles against technically superior opponents. That philosophy, good enough in large numbers, proved decisive not just in World War II but in subsequent conflicts. The AK-47 rifle follows the same principle. The MiG-21 fighter, the RPG-7 anti-tank weapon. Soviet military technology prioritized mass production and battlefield effectiveness over technical perfection. And that approach, pioneered with the T-34, shaped military technology for decades. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Every click tells the algorithm this piece of history is worth remembering. We're dedicated to rescuing these forgotten stories. The engineers who designed the weapons, the commanders who learned their lessons the hard way, the soldiers who fought with what they had. If you want to join us on this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment with your city or state and tell us if someone in your family served in an armored unit, drove a tank, or encountered the T-34 in combat. Thank you for ensuring that Mikhail Koshkin and the engineers, workers, and tank crews who built and fought in the T-34 do not disappear into silence. They created a weapon that changed the course of history. They proved that innovation, industrial capacity, and strategic vision could overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. They won a tank war that everyone said they would lose. They deserve to be remembered.